Sorry for that. What's up, YouTube? This is Project Nerd HQ here. Coming back. Oh, I know exactly why. Because it was recording the audio of that one. You're such a bozo, my guy. You're such a bozo. Let me close this out. All right. I'm live right now. What is up? So, let me give you a little introduction of who I am. Like I said, my name is Project Nerd HQ. I am a sports bro. I love sports. I love politics. Particularly, I love left-leaning politics. Big time socialist. I've come to the crossroads of becoming a big time leftist and socialist from being a big time listener of Michael Brooks. Michael Brooks was a big impact on who I am and how I think politically and how I just view the world. So my whole idea for this whole live streaming podcast is to try to connect, the sports bros out there in the world to your average, not average, but like, your normal leftists so they could have dialogue. Sometimes sports fans are super conservative. Sometimes it gets a little bit heated, and I understand that. And I just look to make a safe space for all, whether it's leftists, whether it's sports people who are interested in politics, and how to see that they blend hand in hand. So while I'm doing that, I'm just going to check real quick just to make sure that this live stream is actually going on, because this is my first time doing it. And as you can see, boom, I am live right now. So I just got to text real quick. And yeah. So with that being said, I would like to just show people one of my favorite places to get my information, as you could say, or as some would say, propaganda. The Gravel Institute. Now, earlier, I was on a open panel, Nick Morning Drive. Shout out to Uncle Freezy and the Nick at Night podcast and the Nick Morning Drive podcast. We was having a little discussion about James Dolan, the owner of the New York Knicks, and I brought up the fact that he is a billionaire capitalist that pays no money when it comes to city or state taxes in New York City for like owning the garden and owning the ground the garden is on, owning all that property around. So his family, not necessarily him, but his father, but everything was gifted to him. His family was given and gifted that tax exempt for life. So that's just something I like to point out to Knicks fans when they start complaining, or basketball fans in general, or just sports fans in general, when they try to say, oh, like politics and sports don't intertwine. They absolutely do. And I like to show people how they actually do. When you look at the NBA, for instance, you have to understand the difference of like what $1 billion is and what $1 million is. So for that, instead of getting into like a Gravel Institute video, I am going to show you my socialisms. Lol. Now, please, I know you guys are going to. Oh, I didn't spell it wrong. Okay, so this right here is a video that I'm just gonna play for you guys,
send money internationally?
So you guys can understand what I'm talking about. This guy,
available 24/7.
Ads.
Each one of these pixels is $1,000. Now, for most people, that is a substantial amount of money. This is 50,000 visualized. That's life-changing for folks like you and I. Next to that life-changing rectangle is 1 million visualized. This is 10 million. All right, this is the one you've been waiting for. Here is a whopping billion visualized. That is a lot of money.
But he worked. But most conservatives and most Republicans would be like, he worked for that though. Like, he deserves all of that. His hard work. He took the risk of of going out there and going to a bank and taking out a loan with good credit to start this business. So he earns all that.
Folks like Gates and
Bullshit.
Bezos have 100+ of these. I can't even fit that on the screen. We call people who own $1 billion or more billionaires. There's a lot of discourse swirling around the topic of billionaires and whether or not this kind of wealth in private hands should exist. This debate has thus far been drowned by liberal voices, both conservatives and progressives. Here we're going to lay out the socialist case against billionaires. Before laying out the socialist case, it's important we come to understand the conservative arguments used to justify billionaires.
Yep.
These arguments and justifications all make appeals to the...
And these are the same arguments that, like, your friend from high school that didn't go to college, that works a minimum wage job, or he's like management and like a Best Buy or something. These are the same BS arguments that they will make. Or, you know, if you have people that are like fastly entwined in like the police force or like the fire department, they will make conservative arguments against socialism while at the same time being in a career which they are paid out in a socialist program, which makes no sense. But anywho.
Good billionaire. This idea that sure there may be bad billionaires who may do bad things, but there are many good billionaires who are self-made, who donate their wealth to charities, who create jobs, innovate, create great things for society, and so on. These are good billionaires who use their wealth for good. Why should we demonize these actors and take away their wealth? It's not particularly hard to expose these points as lacking, and liberal progressives do a decent job of highlighting this. Let's quickly run through them. The title of self-made billionaire is often misleading.
And for those that have a hard time understanding, there's a huge difference between a liberal like a Nancy Pelosi or like a Chuck Schumer and a progressive and a socialist like myself. You know, Bernie Sanders and AOC, who, you know, I love, but I'll be the first one to point out any criticism I have of them, but they are mostly democratic socialists, which means they feel that capitalism as a structure is still a functioning structure that can still operate by just taxing the rich, when a socialist like myself believes that the workers need to be able to control the means of production, need to be able to basically own the stuff that creates stuff when it comes to housing, or when it comes to the transportation sector, or when it comes to like healthcare or like public education, public school, or public college, university, stuff like that.
When you have wealth to begin with, it's not terribly hard to turn out more wealth, to turn 100 million into $1 billion. Kylie Jenner is an apt example of this. In addition to the lucrative tax deductibles and exemptions associated with charitable donations, so billionaires don't have to pay their fair share, these charitable donations allow billionaires to directly control how their donations are used. Pursuing niche pet projects, slapping their names on buildings, buying portraits of themselves, all while avoiding any structural changes which might jeopardize the very economic system which has benefited them and continues to do so. Job creation doesn't mean much when the jobs you are creating are more precarious, lower paying, and more taxing, forcing workers to juggle multiple jobs just to stay afloat. And it's not that these billionaires innovate, so much as these are the actors who most successfully find ways to monetize innovations, most often monetizing innovations from the public sector and happily accepting the public image of an innovator. Now, as solid as these counter-arguments may be, progressives genuinely struggle to argue against the perfect billionaire, an actual rags-to-riches billionaire. A billionaire who not only pays their fair share of tax.
They're talking about like Elon Musk and the fake persona that, like, you know, people think that he's Iron Man, when in all actual reality he's the best at marketing himself. You know, if people actually believe that Jeff Bezos is actually sitting down and like creating rockets and stuff like that, you're out of your mind. He hires the best people. You know, he hires the best PR campaign to have people believing that he actually isn't what he is.
Taxes, but advocates on paying more. A billionaire who earnestly donates their wealth with no ulterior motives or gains. And here's the fundamental issue with liberal progressive arguments advocating the abolition of billionaires. They all rest on the idea that every single billionaire has committed some morally reprehensible act in their record or has the power to. Interference with democracy, abuses of workers, tax dodging, and so on. The existence of just one perfect billionaire entirely kneecaps this progressive argument. Even just the possibility that there can feasibly exist this perfect billionaire who uses their power for good seriously undermines the argument. And what ends up happening is that progressives are burdened with finding dirt in the records of every single billionaire. Otherwise, if they can't do that, the existence of billionaires is okay, and the real issue is just getting bad billionaires to behave.
The idea of a good billionaire does not exist. So, you need to tax them. If they want to make more money, cool. I'm down with you. If you want to make more money, make all the money that you want. But we are going to tax you. We are going to tax the shit out of you. And I could curse because this is my first video. I'm not monetized, so I'm not controlled by any outside forces. So if I want to curse, I can. But I'm not. Shit.
The socialist argument is straightforward. This wealth was never theirs to begin with. The wealth of these billionaires was
Poggers
generated by
take.
the workers.
You know what, Mr. Bloomberg? It wasn't you who made all that money. Maybe your workers played some role in that as well.
No one individual single-handedly does $1 billion worth of labor.
Oh,
Bill
I
Gates
just
is not
realized
the
something.
one generating $1 million worth of work while he takes a mid-afternoon nap. It's generated by those actually sowing and mining, by those assembling the products and transporting the products, by those on the ground doing the work on subsistence wages. I've thoroughly described this relationship of exploitation between the property owner and the worker in my previous videos. But the basic idea is that these workers are generating more value than they're being paid, and it's this surplus value generated which is the origin of profit for the property owner. If the property owner paid their workers exactly the value they generated, there'd be no reason to hire the worker in the first place. This relationship of
Facts.
exploitation is the basis upon which capitalism exists. Without this point of exploitation, there is no profit, there is no billionaire class, and there is no perfect billionaire. What's the solution? Progressives propose taxation as the primary answer in addressing wealth inequality and dissolving the billionaire status. Not only is taxation an increasingly harder feat to accomplish, thanks to our globalized economy in which evading national taxes has never been so easy, but even if these taxation efforts manage to eliminate billionaires, the problems associated with billionaires would still remain. The power of billionaires to abuse workers, to corrupt our political systems, to stand above the law. All these powers.
Yep, and that's the point that I was trying to get across to the people I was talking to earlier. Not the people on the panel, not the other other commentators on the panel, but the people in the chat. You know, because the chat was just going crazy. There was one person that literally was like, "You're wrong because the waiters and waitresses at Madison Square Garden get paid $15 an hour plus tips are in a union." Like, if you're okay with a billionaire like James Dolan, who owns Madison Square Garden, who owns the Knicks, who owns the Rangers, who owns the ground that Penn Station is on, if you're okay with him paying a worker $15 an hour while he pays no taxes, and while you on the other end, your tax money is going to subsidize James Dolan's workers so they can actually live a living wage. Because in New York City, you know, it's hard to believe, but Nomiki Kant, she said this, you know, even she had like a economic expert to break down, to actually live in New York City, the minimum wage should be $21 to $22 an hour. So you literally are arguing and saying it's fine that a billionaire pays no taxes, excuse me, a little bit cotton mouth, pays no taxes when it comes to city taxes or state taxes. You're totally fine with the system that allows him to pay his worker minimum wage when his worker has to like kowtow and bow down to, like, you know, the customers that are there, so they could get pennies and pennies of crumbs of tips. And your tax money that you pay a higher tax rate than James Dolan is subsidized that. That makes no sense to argue. You literally are arguing for a billionaire. Boom.
Don't lie in the amount of money these billionaires have, but rather lies in the fact that they are property owners. unelected, unaccountable individuals who get to privately dictate all economic decisions. And folks like Zuckerberg are acutely aware that their power lies in their private ownership. And it's why they're more than willing to have taxes raised.
And I know you guys are like looking like, I have like a lot of like sports paraphernalia. Yeah, I'm a big time sports fan. And that's one thing that people in the chat was also trying to criticize me for, saying that, you're a socialist who loves to watch capitalist entertainment and capitalism and enjoy capitalism. How can you preach for that? That argument is a 5th grade schoolyard argument. Having that argument is basically like saying that, how can you be for green energy? How can AOC and Bernie Sanders and all these progressive be for green energies, but they don't bike everywhere they go? How can you be, for solar energy, but, you have to take a plane to get to where you want to go? Because the systems that are in place, the structure, the society we live in hasn't been made to actually make the change.
Oh, congratulations! Bezos is no longer a billionaire, but a millionaire. But because he still privately owns Amazon, he can still do very cool things like bend elected politicians to his will by promising to bring jobs to their city or state if they pass certain laws and repeal certain others. Billionaires are a symptom, and you're not going to cure a disease by treating symptoms. Private property's gotta be abolished. And I'm not talking about your toothbrushes, calm down. I'm talking about the means of production. The stuff that produces stuff.
Oh my God, that's such a big word. That's that phrase, means of production. It's so hard to understand. It's like, what are the means of production?
Stuff, which I might add, everyone needs or else they die. Seriously, ask yourself, why do we just let private, unelected, unaccountable individuals claim private ownership over these things and let them just passively live off of our collective labor? The means of production must be freed from the private dictation of individuals and put under the democratic control of the working people, as opposed to having the wealth generated by the workers pocketed by private racketeers so they can buy their third yacht or whatever. Workers under a democratic economy can be paid proportionately to the labor they contribute. The harder you work, the more you're paid. If you want to lead a lavish lifestyle, you've got to work for it, bud. Workers can then debate and hold votes to decide how the remaining surplus and wealth should be used.
That's crazy. To like just that thought, that concept, that's crazy. Workers having rights, your workplace being a democracy. That's crazy. Workers getting to vote on the conditions that they have to work in. That's just insane. I think that would be a democracy. So, and this is the argument, and this is what I don't understand. How can you guys argue for democracy when it comes to like government, when it comes to the state, local, city, municipalities, but God forbid there's any democracy in the workplace?
Whether they want to invest more into developing this or that sector of the economy, to properly fund robust public research and innovation, to further develop labor-saving technology, to improve healthcare services, to tackle public emergencies, and so on. The most rational thing to do in a civilized society, as opposed to having the public completely at the mercy of private individuals and their feelings of generosity that day. I just want to make a quick point now that we have a lot of these cases and solutions laid out. We can understand why billionaires and their priests peddle pro-billionaire arguments.
If you look at the bottom of the screen, these are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. You have Steven Crowder. You have Dennis Prager. You have my favorite little chia pet, Ben Shabibo. And you have Charlie Kirk, the person that likes to go on college campuses to debate college students while simultaneously not graduating or going to college. So he likes to argue that universities are filled with all these liberal professors, all these liberal, socialist, Marxist professors, while at the same time he hasn't even stepped foot or had a class in a university or a college. Let that sit in. Think about that.
But why do so many working class individuals make these same arguments? The working classes have an intuitive understanding that all around them, freedom doesn't exist unless you're rich. It's only the wealthy who have the freedom to exercise their humanity under capitalism, to spend time with their family and friends, to pursue and develop personal hobbies, travel and actually experience the world, all without putting their existence in jeopardy.
The reason I love you.
Oh, commercial! Capitalism.
The freedom to exist as a human being becomes synonymous with being rich under capitalism. So when naive progressives come along, talking about the immorality of being a billionaire, and by proxy, the immorality of being rich, progressives are unwittingly attacking a freedom many desperately yearn for. And with their plan to tax away wealth, they're telling the worker if they ever do get
Yeah, because, your average Walmart worker in West Virginia, they actually believe that one day if they keep working a minimum wage job and they can move up the corporate ladder, and then they will be able to be in the billionaire class, which is complete and utter horseshit. A little background on myself. I myself came from an immigrant family. I grew up in an immigrant household. My grandmother being from Puerto Rico, my grandfather from my grandmother from my mother's side of the family being from Puerto Rico, and my grandfather being from Trinidad and Tobago, and then my father's side of the family was strictly from Puerto Rico. Crazy revolutionaries. I will show a video of one of my uncles, and a cousin of mine. A cousin of mine actually tried to kill the president of the United States, but hopefully the CIA doesn't shut down this YouTube live. But anywho, back to the video. Why billionaires are bad.
this freedom, they're going to snatch it away and condemn them back to a life on the treadmill. So you can understand why many workers are so quick to defend the rich, to defend billionaires, picking up whatever argument they can in an attempt to defend the freedom they one day hope to have. Contrast this to the socialist argument and solution. The socialist is not attacking wealth in and of itself. The socialist is pointing out that those who are wealthy did it off of your labor, and that our economy ought to earnestly adhere to the principle that those who work more should be paid more. You can support me on Patreon and join these lovely peeps. Look at them, those beautiful bastards. I love them all. You'll also be doing your part to spread socialism. Follow me on Twitter, and of course subscribe for more leftist content.
His name is Halim Aram. I'm gonna lower it so you can see it. Boom, 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 boom. So yeah, like I was saying, I grew up in a family, or grew up in an immigrant family that believed in that entire American dream of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and conforming to what it is, or the idea of what a good immigrant is, you know. So a lot of my family were cops from my mother's side. My mother was a retired cop. She was actually fired from the NYPD, but that's no here or there. My uncle was a retired cop. You know, and I myself, I used to be an EMT. You know, I decided to not be a cop and decided that working in EMS was actually better, you know, in my opinion at the time. But every job that I had beforehand, you know, whether it's working in restaurants, like literally like doing every job possibly you can while working in a restaurant, whether it's hosting, whether it's busboy, whether it's bartender, whether it's serving, whether it's working in the back, you know, in the back of house, you know, as a line prep or as a cook, you know, peanut butter and company in the West Village, or whether it was moving up the corporate ladder and becoming a manager. You know, I've been manager at almost every job that I had, whether it's restaurants, whether it's like a supermarket, you know. So when I became an EMT and started working at EMS, automatically I was given an opportunity to be an operations supervisor, and then from there a 911 supervisor. And I was a 911 supervisor in the South Bronx, you know, working out of Bronx Lebanon Hospital. Working in that field and working in the medical field just generally just in general, is how I came to where I am right now. You know, when it comes to how I think on a philosophical level, or how I just think on a society level. You know, it helps shape my political thoughts, my ideas, and it was very disheartening. You know, just to let you know, an EMT in New York City makes about $16 an hour when the minimum wage is $15 an hour, and that's for a private company. FDNY, you know, they max out at 48 grand, 56 grand, and that's living in New York City, and that's horrible. You know, when you put in consideration that when you work in EMS and you're an EMT or a paramedic, that you literally are working 3 hours, three days a week, 12 hours a day, and the company you work for is not willing or is not too inclined to like throw overtime. So you go in and you get a job at another private company. You know, so you're taxing your body 3 days working for one company and then another 3 days working for another company at 12 to 16 hours each day. You know, and you're like, oh, but you have the money. The money's there. What are you complaining about? Well, if you paid me more, instead of $16 an hour or $17, $18 an hour, and actually paid me like $25 or $26, $28 an hour, I wouldn't have to tax my body as I am right now. You know, and that, a lot of people that I know, my cousin, who she was in EMS for 20 years, can't even lift up a ball from the floor because her back is messed up. You know, my supervisor, David Roman, who I call Uncle Roro, love him to death. He was there at Ground Zero. You know, there's a picture of him on the front of the New York Times being there at Ground Zero, covered in ash. His whole respiratory system is messed up. You know, what did the U.S. government do for those first responders? Nothing. And that's why I tried to bridge the gap between like sports bros or like, you know, first responders or like, you know, neo-libs and progressives. You know, you have to remove that whole tribalism mindset of like big R Republican, big D Democrat, socialist, this, that, and the third, because they're all labels that don't mean anything here in America. You know, both the Democrat and the Republican Party, they both cater to their corporate interests, their corporate donors. You know, it's just the Republican Party does it a lot more and horrible, and the Democrat Party does it not as bad. You know, but they still do it. But then you have progressives like AOC, like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. These are actually politicians that they don't take any corporate black dark money. You know where the funding is coming from. So if I know deep down that I'm funding something, they're going to have my best interests at heart. So please, I encourage you guys to please look up like Justice Democrats and like other leftist progressive organizations that actually do the work to like put politicians in place. And I do get it that this whole argument of politics, it gets boring after a while. And I know it's like, it took me a while to understand that I cannot just blindly tell people to have blind trust into a system that has failed them over the years, both Republicans and Democrats. So I know it's hard when people believe that their vote don't count, especially when you have such an archaic system like the Electoral College that caters to like 4 states that actually come down to who's going to be the president. Like something like that, it has to be changed, you know. But that's why people like myself are trying to be here to help you guys filter through the mess that is the world we live in. You know, and I'm not perfect. You know, sometimes I have to reflect on certain takes that I have or certain beliefs that I have. You know, I'm man enough to admit that. You know, but 98% of the time, I do believe that I'm right. So, this right here is the Gravel Institute. And if you don't know who Mike Gravel is, Mike Gravel is a politician, or was a former politician, that released the Pentagon report, Pentagon Papers, that blew up the whole U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. And so people understand how COVID-19 and capitalism, how this all intertwines. It's all intertwines. So I will put this video of Mike Gravel so you guys know, those who don't know who Mike Gravel is, could get an understanding of who he is. Mind you, at the time that Mike Gravel, Bernie Sanders wasn't in office in like the Senate or anything like that. So at the time, Mike Gravel was the Bernie Sanders of the Senate at the time. So people understand. So the same arguments that you hear right now for Bernie Sanders and for like every socialist or like Democrat socialist or people who they want to just blindly label socialist without even understanding what that concept means or even did the groundwork to understand what that concept means. These are the same arguments, just recycled. Mike Gravel dealt with the same arguments that was used during the McCarthy era to try to demonize socialists, to try to demonize communists. Because, during the FDR days, we did have a big movement and a big presence of socialists in this country and communists in this country. And they got with FDR, who FDR himself was a part of the ruling class. And he went to his other ruling elites and was like, listen, we gonna have to do something, because if we don't, heads will be on pikes. Just like those insurrectionists and that Trump dude was like heads on pikes. That's what he did. And the whole social movement, that's where you got unemployment. That's when you got Social Security. Later on down the line, welfare, labor laws and stuff. These were all stuff that capitalists argued against. So the same arguments you hear now in 2021 are the same recycled BS arguments that have been used forever. The United States, the FBI used to label Dr. Martin Luther King as a crazy socialist, as a commie, as a Maoist. He's being fun. Like, they used to put out pictures of Dr. King at like communist, socialist recruitment schools. Like, come on.
Dan Ellsberg called me on the phone and said, Senator, would you be willing to release the Pentagon Papers? And I said, yes. It took me seconds to respond. I didn't have to think about it. If it was important for Bob McNamara to know how we got into the mess of Vietnam, it was 1,000 times more important for the American people to know that. I served in the United States Army in the Counterintelligence Corps. We opened people's mail and wiretapped them. I really wasn't proud of what I was doing. I became disenchanted. Yet the first motivation for my going into the service was I probably would have been drafted had I not enlisted. And that's, of course, what saved me from going to Korea. I probably would not have survived it. My experience in the military really set my intellectual course. I love my country. And whenever I hear these statements, my country right or wrong, that I can't think of anything that's more immoral than that. If my country is doing wrong, I want to criticize it and change it. If my country is doing the right thing, I want to support it. That's the difference.
Human beings are being killed as I speak to you tonight. Killed as a direct result of policy decisions we as a body have made.
5 presidential administrations lied to the American people as to why we were in Southeast Asia, where we lost 58,000 American lives and 2 or 3 million Southeast Asian lives.
No, because we got to fight against those communists, because we cannot have communism or socialism in this country, because communism and socialism mean the government doing stuff for you and no iPhones. Venezuela.
There was no reason for that. Today, you have a Baskin Robbins in Hanoi. You say, what was this Vietnam War all about? Why did all these people were killed? It was a tragedy. And the people who died in Vietnam died in vain. And when you get people like John McCain felt that we could have won the Vietnam War, there was nothing to win. It was a civil war that we essentially incited.
Arms. Arms are being severed. Metal is crashing through human bodies.
Can you imagine one human being trying to kill another human being? And that's what we do as part of national policy. It's a little wonder when...
No, brother, you're lying, brother. You're lying, brother. We do what we do because we have to keep dominating and show America is the best. This man's lying.
When our military come back to the country, they get PTSD. They're over there killing other people, and they don't see the reason for it. And there is no reason for it. It's not logical. This is the scourge of the human race, that we go from war to war to war. Why we're the world's policemen? The world doesn't want us to be the policemen of the world. In fact, we're reviled in many parts of the world because we act as policemen.
Oh, no, you're lying, brother. The world loves us. The world loves the United States. This man's a goddamn liar.
We go into other people's countries, taking the power of the military to sustain corporations like the United Fruit, to associate with tyrants. It's immoral. The attitude that we're superior to other people is really our undoing. We're no better, we're no worse. We have to change our whole national identity with respect to other people in the world.
We have to turn to Star Trek, my guy. We have to move our society towards a Star Trek society. Yes.
We have to treat it as equals. I wish to call out the American Empire for what it's done around the world in killing people, innocent people, without reason.
Red, white, and blue, Superman, Captain America.
Under the guise that we're trying to spread democracy. Killing people is not spreading democracy.
Mind you, COVID has killed more people than the war in Afghanistan. It's right in the middle of the war of Iraq. It's more of the war in Yemen. But if you try to make me wear a mask,
we need to get this message to the American people. We have to stop wars.
and that's what you people have to understand. We are supposedly the greatest country in the world, the most powerfulest, the best society. But we got our asses kicked by the damn sniffles, by a cough, is what we lost to. And then just, but China, there's in China. I understand that. I understand where it originated from. But their death total is not in comparison of ours. And you think they're releasing the numbers, my guy? If that's the case, then the entire world is dying. Like, the arguments it's the worms for brains for me. And I know I'm a boomer saying that, but hey.
These days, the most stunning thing about capitalism is the drive it seems to have to self-destruct. What an amazing reality that
just want to let you guys know, the gentleman who's speaking right now is Professor Richard Wolff. He is the OG Marxist professor. Please, if you want to understand what this is, if you're scared, if these words frighten you, come on down. We could watch Professor Wolff together. You could be in the chat. We could have another window pop up. You could have your whatever you want. This is what Sports Bros are all about. To help you heal. Yes.
country with the biggest defense establishment in the world cannot defend itself against the COVID-19 virus half as well as dozens of countries with much less military and many fewer resources.
But we will bomb the shit out of you. All right, I'm going to stop pausing it.
The fundamental purpose of government, and this is something that conservatives and liberals both agree on, is to keep the people safe and secure. If you think about the CDC's annual budget, it's about $11 billion a year. In comparison, one defense contractor alone, Lockheed Martin, earns almost $50 billion a year.
Ooh, do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? This is the CDC. This is the Center of Disease Control. But we give them $48.3 billion. How do you defend this? This is undefendable whatsoever. There is no reason for the US to try to be the big bag police of the world. Are you serious?
5 times as much as the United States spends on the CDC. All the money the United States spends on jets, satellites, aircraft carriers, cyber warfare capabilities, it would total almost $1 trillion a year.
But Venezuela, bro. Venezuela.
Madam President, I believe in a strong military, but we cannot continue to give more money to the Pentagon than it needs. We are spending more on the military than the next 11 nations.
Ooh, that
Russia,
man is
China,
that
UK,
man is so.
France, you name it. More than all of them combined. We are talking about the need to defeat our most immediate adversary.
Like, hold on for a second. Like, look at the production value on this recruitment video. Like, this is literally like on par with Disney Plus. You know, like, actually, this was like, if anybody saw or remember the Inhumans, this is way better production value than the Inhumans was.
You name it. More than all of them combined.
Oh, camera shaking.
We are talking about the need to defeat our most immediate adversary right now. An adversary that has taken, in recent months, over 120,000 American lives. And that, of course, is the coronavirus.
Oh man, Bernie, we need to update this Gravel Institute. COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. Let's just see for a second. We are literally 12,000 away from 500,000. But, you know, if we could, you know, keep bombing the Middle East and, you know, foreign wars, and, you know, have to make sure, you know, the military industrial complex is paid off, you know, airline companies, you know, we gotta, you know, even though majority of, you know, oil subsidies is taxpaying money subsidies, $900 billion, but, you know, they get to keep the profit. It's America, baby.
When the coronavirus crisis began, defense contractors sought assurance from the federal government that they would be protected and taken care of, even if their workers couldn't go to the office or do their jobs because of mandated social distancing requirements. The federal government committed to supporting major defense contractors in the United States because it considered them strategically important corporations.
The defense industry is relatively immune to the vicissitudes of the economy. In a few days to regroup, Lockheed surged up to 380 today.
Major American...
The stock market, bro. The stock market, bro. The stock market is very indicative of Main Street society, bro. If the stock market is not doing good, then the fry cooks at McDonald's, bro. This all go back to the market, bro.
Defense contractors are for-profit, publicly traded corporations. And there's a real moral hazard here, because no matter what they do, the federal government is always going to have their back and support them.
In other words, these companies, and I'm talking about Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, for all intents and purposes, are governmental agencies. Over 90% of their revenue comes from the taxpayers.
A plane from the US-backed Saudi-led coalition struck a bus carrying them. Dozens died. Munitions experts tell CNN this was a US-made Mark Mk-82 bomb. This number here denotes Lockheed Martin, one of the top US defense contractors.
And Lockheed Martin isn't the only major US defense contractor. There are dozens of corporations that make billions and billions of dollars a year. Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Boeing. These are major companies.
Each one of those companies that he just showed on screen, plus the first one that he talked to, each one of those companies were funded more than the CDC was. How can you justify that? How can you literally sit on your high horse, preach all this red, right, and blue freedom, but when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to science, I'm not gonna wear a mask, bruh. Masks are stupid. It doesn't work.
Companies that make billions of dollars that have been not much use to us during the coronavirus pandemic, which represents one of the greatest existential threats the United States has faced, perhaps in its history.
I want to give a shout out to my little cousin Coquito. Coco, what's up, baby?
As it's achieved increasingly apocalyptic proportions in this country, there still doesn't seem to be any sort of initiative to get something like test and trace going so that we could reopen without compromising safety. Like the fact that it's still not going now.
Bullshit, brother. Bullshit, brother. All you want to do is have the government be able to track me, brother. You want to just put a chip inside me, brother, and just have the government track me. I'm totally fine with Amazon and iPhones and Google and Gmail and Yahoo and every other entity in the United States and every other application that I use to track me. But government testing and tracing for a virus, bro. Bruh.
Kind of makes me think we live in a failed state.
We have research and development into planes that the military does not need, but we can't get gloves and gowns and plastic face shields to our healthcare workers.
We gotta have bullets, brother. We have to have bullets, brother. You don't understand, brother. Vampires are coming from Canada. We have to have the bullets.
Middle of the pandemic. So from a manufacturing standpoint, from a priority standpoint, public health has been left by the wayside for far too long. And I think when we come out of this pandemic, we need a reorganization. We need a reprioritization of our values. And that also includes funding into public health.
We have an aversion to sort of public health and to health overall in the US because somehow got thought of as a handout, a giveaway. There's something sort of socialist about the idea of providing basic services to your population. And so reframing it as sort of a national security priority is one thing.
That's right, brother. In the Constitution, the framers clearly put out life, liberty, and freedom. The life part has nothing to do with healthcare whatsoever. The life part actually has the ability for you to die in this world. Because that's what it is to be an American, to die.
But I don't think it gets at the sort of aversion that many politicians in the U.S. have to social spending and health spending in particular.
I think about, how easy that last military funding bill went through Congress before this all started. Bipartisan, there was just no brakes on it whatsoever. It's always, how can we pay for this? And it's never with militarization.
Because you gotta have them goddamn bullets.
The 2020 National Defense Authorization Act is about making sure.
Now I'm going to pause this for a second, just to vent out. When you hear my displeasure for the military, It has nothing to do with you see the people standing behind this orange Cheeto. I have no animosity towards the service members. I myself am a service member. I have no animosity towards them because them themselves are victims of the system. All of them, I want to say like 90, 95, 98% of them, all of them, majority of them probably come from poor backgrounds. When you have poor black and brown people in this country and they need to be exploited, why you think healthcare is not free? Why you think college is not free? Because having the military and having those benefits is a perfect justification by the system. Oh, look at the military. Go there, get free healthcare, get college, even though, the GI Bill has little fine print. If you fail a class, you have to pay out of pocket. But the conservative argument against that is you shouldn't be failing in the first place, which is a stupid argument. It'd be one thing if these service members were actually paid properly for the sacrifice that they are making. The military bill when Trump signed it was $738 billion. This past one was $900 and something billion. But these service members going into the military straight, like 18, 19 years old, they're getting paid 20, 17, 18 grand base pay. The poverty line in the United States is anywhere from $28,000 to $26,000. So we are still happy and fine with a system that allows these private military companies like Lockheed Martin to get so much money. We socialize the military, but we don't pay the military members a proper wage. But pay. They get healthcare, they get education. They get to share a room with 3 other people. My guy, like. The accommodations are through the roof, which is horseshit. I will have on one of these days a friend of mine, real close friend of mine, Timur. He's a descendant of the Uyghurs. He's a former service member. I met him in trade school, going to trade school to be an electrician, and love him like a brother. And I will have him on, so you don't think that I'm just talking out of emptiness. To have a service member speak to you guys.
Our warfighters have the tools, resources, and equipment you need to...
Yeah, and this was actually happening. I had friends that work EMS. Like I said, I come for EMS. I worked in the hospital in the OR as a PCT. So this was actually going on.
Fight and to win all the time to win.
We don't have enough masks. We don't have enough gowns.
We're making our military stronger and more powerful than ever before.
We don't have enough gloves. We don't have enough nasal swabs.
And if you saw where we started from not so long ago.
We don't have enough vials for tests. We're doing reagents.
You'd really be amazed. I want to thank everybody, but I want to also thank those great companies that really made this equipment, because I have seen it and I've seen much of it in action, and I've frankly never seen anything like it in my life. So I just want to congratulate you all, because together we are protecting our people, our values, our traditions, and our glorious American flag.
That pause was on purpose. When he said what he said, he automatically assumed that he was going to get applause, but they didn't applaud. So he kept the silence. And the crowd took that as a hint to, we need to applaud. Not the commander-in-chief, but their God.
If the horrific pandemic we are now experiencing has taught us anything, it is that national security means a lot more than building bombs, missiles, jet fighters, tanks, submarines, nuclear warheads, and other weapons of mass destruction. National security also means doing everything that we can to make sure that every man, woman, and child in this country lives with dignity and security.
The slogan for our time can be and should be, we can do better than capitalism. We can take care of our needs, meet our needs, and do without the subordination of everything to the private profit of a few.
Crazy. That's just crazy. You know, and it's looking at our society and coming to the realization that certain aspects of how we live needs to be changed. You know, particularly when it comes to like infrastructure. You know, when it comes to like decommodifying certain sectors of our economy, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to energy, when it comes to health, when it comes to housing, you know, when it comes to education, specifically education. You know, there's a famous clip, and I'll play it in a little bit, by Fred Hampton, that said that education is the key. You know, because without education, all you're going to have is just like black imperialists or Puerto Rican imperialists. You know, like I said, my family from my father's side were big in the revolution movement in Puerto Rico. You know, my uncle Elias Beauchamp was killed by the U.S. government in Old San Juan, executed, shot in the head, because prior to that, there were college kids protesting on a college campus, and the military, under the direct order from the U.S. government, the military that was put in place at the time, ran those kids over with a tank and killed them, shot them. So my uncle, being the radical that he is, he killed the chief of police that the U.S. has put in place. I get it. Committed a crime. Committed murder. But how can you call yourself a country of law and order if you don't actually stand by that principle? You cannot say that you're a nation of law and order when the FBI and the Chicago Police Department conspired to kill Fred Hampton. You cannot say that you're a nation of law and order when it has shows, and down to like, you know, the campaign manager for Ronald Reagan showed that the Southern Switch strategically targeted certain phrases, certain dog whistles in order to get, you know, the vote from the white racists. Point blank. I know it's weird if you hear me say that, because you look at me and be like, oh, you look white. Yes, I may be Puerto Rican background, you know, but I do benefit from colorism, and I'll be the first one to point that out and emphasize it. I do benefit from colorism, and I noticed that specifically when I got into the workforce. You know, I told you, every job that I had, I was able to move up the ladder, become manager, a supervisor. You know, so growing up how I grew up in the Bronx and Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and Far Rockaway, Queens, you know, being poor, Section 8, my mother on food stamps, living in New York City public housing, you know, I have certain shared lived experience with my friends, my POC friends, you know, other Latinidad people that are dark skinned or a little bit lighter, you know, and I do recognize that I certainly benefit from colorism, and I get to navigate this world in a different way than the people that I have lived, shared experience with. Let my dog come in, because my dog always loves to, you know, show himself on my lives. But like I was saying, you know, I always pointed out that you could take me and take like a light skinned Latinidad person like a John Leguizamo, and you could put us in a room with 30 other white people, right? And it will only take those people 2 seconds to point out the Puerto Ricans in the room, the quote unquote Spics in the room. Trigger warning. I apologize for using that word. But it will only take them 2 or 3 seconds to point that out. And by using this analysis, I try to use this to point out to the other members of the Latinidad community that benefit from colorism. I like to point this out that, yes, it may have taken them 2 to 3 seconds to point out that you were other, but you still got invited into that room. There are certain members of our community, of the Latinidad community, that regardless, they do not get that invitation. And you can narrow it down to skin color, where there's colorism, which is a big problem in the Caribbean, and gender as well, and gender identity and gender expression, because people get scared, you know. So you other people that you were scared of, and you have to be able to point that out, you know. And I hope to believe that you guys understand where I'm coming from, you know. Like I started out saying this, I'm a big time sports fan, you know, Boricua, Puerto Rican, you know. So growing up, my uncle preached to me the importance of knowing who Roberto Clemente was. And a lot of people know Roberto Clemente as being the first, quote unquote, Latin ball player. They praise him for being the first to cross it over, the first Latin ball player. And you're like, wow, that's crazy. Now, is it that he's the first Latin ball player, or he's the first dark-skinned Latin ball player? It's crazy to think of it, because there was another baseball player before Roberto Clemente played baseball who was half Mexican and half Native American, indigenous. And you're like, who could that be? And I'm about to show you who that is. Ted Williams from the Boston Red Sox. Ted Williams is half Mexican and half Native indigenous. But he is not credited as the first Latin or indigenous player in Major League Baseball. And if you think, oh, this is just some socialist lying, this is some soy boy lying. Okay. One of the first things that popped up. Crazy. Oh, there's a PBS film on it? Oh, awesome. Oh. You gotta love PBS, public broadcasting. PBS. Can't find it, but hey, hold on. My apologies. Sorry. Ted Williams. Ted Williams played 1940. Gone that way. Hermano. Ted Williams is the last major league player to pop-ups. Jesus. The internet is crazy. Hope this is not on my end. Hold on, I know this is... Boom. There we go. While many of Williams' professional accomplishments and personal classes were widely known, Davis said few knew about Williams' ethnic background. Well-researched 2013 book that came out, The Kid, The Immortal Life of Ted Williams. Davis said Williams kept his Mexican-American heritage a secret at a time when no black players were allowed in the major leagues, and the Red Sox were owned by Tom Yawkey, a controversial figure who was mostly super racist, who was the last owner to... Oh, God. Wow. I thought it was the Yankees, but obviously it's the Red Sox. That's crazy, though, to think of it, though. How is Ted Williams... How's Roberto Clemente credited as the first Latin player in baseball, but Ted Williams is half Mexican? That's crazy. It kind of sounds like that. It was Ted Williams' proximity to whiteness in society that allowed him to blend in. It's like someone benefiting off of colorism. Full circle. This just killed it. First live stream, and I'm just already full circling you guys. But yeah, this is the world that we live in. You know, I know sometimes some people, it's hard. You know, it's a little personal. You feel like you're being challenged. And it took me a while to understand that. To understand the whole concept and the idea of being challenged, you know, and having your beliefs challenged, and being able to look at everything from a bird's eye, out of the box view. You know, you see the inequalities here in the United States, the crazy wealth and inequality. You know, Republicans love to blame Democrat liberal cities, as they like to say. That's for the past 4 years in Trump's political climate. That's the word phrase that's been thrown out a lot. You know, the whole liberal cities. You know, even though West Virginia and Alabama have been labeled and marked by the UN as two of the most impoverished places to live in, in the Western society. It's crazy, you know? And then a conservative will literally argue to your face. Well, at least crime's not up in those states, you know. So you could allow somebody to be poor as long as they don't commit crimes. Well, little do they know. And that's what the computer is for. If you was to Google top 10 dangerous cities in the U.S., well, this is 2021. So, okay. Let's look at this. Let's look at the list of the top 10 dangerous cities. And we're going to point out how many of them are liberal or how many of them are Republican states. So, Detroit, Michigan. You could say that's a my problem. Gretchen Whitmore, so it's a Democrat-run state. St. Louis, Illinois. Or St. Louis, Missouri. My apologies. Let me see. Governor of St. Louis, which I know there's no such thing as a governor of St. Louis. Wow, I'm looking bad right now. But Memphis is Republican. Maryland is Democrat. Democrat. Republican. Democrat. Republican. You see it's not that much of a difference. You know, a little bit here, a little bit there, but New York City, for instance, pays more into the federal tax pool than Kentucky. But Kentucky and Texas take more out of the federal tax pool than New York City. New York City takes the least out of the federal tax pool. So, New York and California, liberal states, those two states, the economy in those two states, they help to subsidize Republican states. Now that's crazy, you know. Why bring up that argument? Only reason I bring up that argument is because conservatives love pointing out liberal and progressive states, but never Republican states. It's like QAnon. Like, the pedophiles and rapists are only Democrats. They're not Republicans. That's like saying Jim Jordan didn't try to hide someone getting sexually assaulted while he was a wrestling coach. So, the decommodification of our society when it comes to like homes is something that the Gravel Institute, and this is going to be, you know, I'm going to be referencing a lot of stuff so you guys could see the source. I'm not just going to throw something out in the air without sourcing it. So I will source it to you and you will see it. Boom. So the Gravel Institute, decommodification of the housing market. It's a crazy concept.
American housing is in crisis. Right now, up to 12 million Americans are behind an average of $5,800 on rent and risk eviction.
You damn right. I'm going to start this by saying I live in the Bronx, by Cortona Ave. If anybody knows what that at, you know where I'm at. But I live in the Bronx, and I paid $1,300 for a 5-flight walk-up. Boom.
With eviction moratoriums soon to expire, we're facing an unprecedented wave of evictions and foreclosures that will crash straight into millions of struggling families across the country. But the truth is, this crisis didn't begin with the pandemic. In fact, housing has been in crisis for a very long time. Even before the pandemic, in places like New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco, median rents for even one-bedroom apartments could approach $2,500 a month or more. About a third of people in Los Angeles spend a majority of their income on housing. In New York City, about 20% of all renters pay most of their income to their landlord. And in my district, Astoria, about a quarter of residents have to spend most of their paycheck on rent. And the crisis isn't just in big cities. In 95% of all US counties, workers making the minimum don't make enough to afford a one-bedroom rental on their own. The Harvard Center for Housing Studies warns of a new normal for housing in the United States, in which nearly half of all renter households spend almost a third of their income.
Not gonna lie. I may end this stream right now just so I could, you know what? I may see if I could leave it on. Hold on. Let me see. The link in new tab. Let me see. Support my man, the Unc, Mr. Good old Ron Cleveland.
Feeling good about the game tonight, man. I'm feeling good about the game tonight, though.
Yeah.
Man. I think Randall gonna score 35 points, and RJ he gonna score like 17 points.
Yeah.
Then Peyton, he gonna score 13 points.
Alex Burke.
Probably like 7 points.
7? Oh boy.
Yeah. Cause he ain't been doing good lately. You haven't been doing good lately. Hey, we got some people that's inconsistent.
Hey.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And that's Burt and Bullock, Knotts, Frank. But even Frank ain't playing, but you know how that goes.
Last time we saw him, he looked good before he went out.
Exactly.
I think I'm gonna end this stream.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we sitting on 150 people in the building.
Too much women.
And we got 66 likes. Hey, let's get them likes to reflect.